inspiring and a wonderful way to start the day. I am so excited to introduce our host, President Gibbs from Metropolitan College.
Good morning, colleagues. How's everyone doing? Well, brother Dove, let me just say this. While you may have your PhD from the corner of Lenox Avenue, UCLA, you are still a champion. You're a world champion. You know, colleagues, you mentioned a few things in your comments. You mentioned the Willis Bridge. And since we moved our campus full-time to the Bronx from Lower Manhattan, I've never got stuck on the Willis Bridge. So this morning I'm coming, and next time I hear ding, 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 ding. I'm like, there's no train tracks. The bridge is turning sideways. And I'm sitting there, I had to videotape it to my colleague and say, I'm really stuck on the Willis Bridge. But that journey here reminds me of something. Brother Bob, it's great to see you. This reminds me, and protocol have already been established, and certainly to Commissioner Davies, thank you so much for your support for Metropolitan College of New York. As the 7th president and the first African-American president in the 60-year history of this institution, I've been here for about 18 months now. And I remember when I interviewed for this position, we were in Lower Manhattan. It was beautiful, right there on the Hudson, right there on 60 West Street, but something was missing. When I walked out the door, I didn't feel it. And then on day one, I came to South Bronx. And I looked at my vice president for academic affairs, and I said, this is where we need to be. This out here, that's my people. Right over here, behind you, is a building that's housing 275 young black men called Horizon Juvenile Detention Center. I said, this is where we need to have impact. And I made it a commitment to open up our doors to this community. I sold that building, and I moved here full time. That deserves a round of applause. And so this Fatherhood initiative is the anchor to this impact. I spoke at the Fatherhood initiative recent at a conference here, session, workshop. And when you see me, you just see President Gibbs. But when you start peeling back that onion, the suit, the shoes shine, the hands done, and the feet done, and the groomness, you take all that away. It's just a boy standing here who was in special ed all the way until his 11th grade in high school, whose mother bet him $50 that he would not graduate from high school with his class, who took that as motivation, not because she didn't think I could do it, but what would motivate this brother. Self-contained classes, 6 out of 8 periods, and I'm going into my junior year in high school. I didn't even know my high school had a 4th floor. And by the grace of God and the praying community, this brother, take all of this off, earned 3 degrees from Howard University and ascend to a college. I got 2 comments to make about why we're here today. Fathers. I've lost my father, I lost my brother, 2 brothers. I'm the last soldier standing. And I remember very vividly when I went to my dad and I said, Dad, my wife of 24 years was a double lung and heart transplant recipient. I said, Renee's pregnant. And he just looked at me like, you, Brother Bobbitt, That's all he did. I'm waiting for him to say, congratulations, son. I said, I think it's a boy. He said, I'm waiting on him to say it. Like, you contributing to the legacy. Great job. He looked me square in my face and said, don't have him unless you're ready to take care of him. He said, so let me put that in perspective. You go to work all day long. and you know that your wife took out some chicken or some turkey wings, and you come home and there's nothing there because your boys have eaten. You're comfortable with going into that refrigerator and grabbing your bologna and cheese. Then congratulations. And one time I said, Dad, can I borrow $50? He said, I got it. He said, but I want to find out what you're going to say when your son asks you for $50. And he says, Daddy, where's the milk for that cereal? He don't want to hear, I'll bring it back. He wants it now. True story, my wife, 6, 7 years later, calls me. Honey, I said, what's up, baby? She said, you know I had 4 turkey wings out this morning. She said, I'm feeding the boys and there's 2 left. And I said, those are for your daddy. And Jeremiah looked at her, square in her face and said, no, Daddy said, if we hungry, we can eat. She said, what do you want me to do? I said, let them boys eat. I'll be good. And the other day I stood in front of these men. And for the first time in a long time, I actually shed some tears. Because I'm looking at these brothers who are trying to reconnect with their families, with their sons who don't have visitation or have mental challenges. They're trying to connect. And I felt so safe. I teared up because I released. There's power, brothers, in releasing what we've built inside of us. Because the expectations for us to succeed and to lead is so heavy sometimes. And sometimes people just don't take a moment to say, how are you doing? No, not about what you know, but how are you? And so I'm glad that Metropolitan College of New York can serve as that safe space. And them brothers walked out the door and said, who was that brother? And Felicia said, that's the president. They said, get out of here. You can't be that cool. But the brothers loved on me. And I'm reminded of this conversation just 30 minutes ago of my youngest son, who's trying me right now. Who's trying me. And I called him and I said, and I'm telling you the truth about President Gibbs. Because he hasn't called me in a while because he knows he's trying me. And I said, so I'm just calling to tell you that I love you. And I want us to get on track. I said, but the foundation by which a father and son's relationship is built on is trust. I said, it's very difficult to put that toothpaste back in the tube once it's out. So you have to be very careful what you say to me because these things can't just get washed away. And I remember on Christmas, when they were arguing, he was trying me again. And I wear a size 14, so he only tried me but so long. And he said something, and I'm sharing this with the fathers. He says, I said, why y'all acting all, like y'all don't want to go in there with him? He said, Dad, you set the tone. You set the stage. The only way he's going to bridge that gap with me is I got to allow him in. I can't be cold towards him because I'm like, I know what I'm dealing with, but we got to give a little bit. Because the young men who are looking up to us, they're nervous right now. They're scared. It's hard to find themselves right now. Identity, who are you? Understanding your why. Why are you here? What's your purpose? It's evading our young men right now. And so I'm just so glad that we can be a hub here in the South Bronx to bridge that gap. And we're going to do everything we can because we're living proof, this brother right here, that strong fathers in a strong household will produce some strength. It's not going to be easy, but we got to show up. We got to be present for them. And I carry that with a badge of honor. as a former national CEO of 100 Black Men of America, I know what it means to mentor young people. You know, the biggest challenge that they face is that we don't keep our word to them. Fathers, it's okay not to be okay. But if you say you're gonna show up, show up. Because they're tired of people saying they're gonna show up for them and never show up for them. So be present. And it's not always just being physical. It's not always about the dollars that you can give them. I'm talking about just that ear. Let them make their decisions and live with it. If they don't ask for it, don't just give it to them. Because if they ask for it, that means they're gonna do something with it. But if we just give to try to make up time, you will continuously lose time. Because they won't appreciate it. So thank you, EYCD, for your support, for your belief in us. Just look at this beautiful room. This is what I envision. Give yourselves a round of applause. We are a community partner. We are here from day one, and we will be here tomorrow, next week, next year, and for years to come, as long as I'm the president of this institution. Thank you so much.
Welcome, everyone. That was such an inspiring morning to start our conversations, and I really wanted to take some time today in this panel to really show off what the agencies are doing and have been doing and want to do. One thing I was remiss in mentioning when I introduced the Children's Cabinet and the fatherhood work, we've been meeting with agencies, almost 20 plus agencies on a regular basis, monthly, since November of 2024. And a lot of the work that you'll be hearing about today is, came about from that work, but also some of that actually started even beforehand. So I'm super excited to share that. I'm going to go ahead and let each of my panelists introduce themselves. And I just wanted to mention the DOC commissioner was really excited to attend, but he was called by the mayor to another event, so unfortunately he won't be able to join, but we do have Nell Colón from DOC who will be on a later panel. So I'll hand off to Stephen.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Stephen Chambers, the Executive Director for the NYC Young Men's Initiative. I'm also here on behalf of Commissioner Ahsia, who is the Commissioner for the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Simone Hawkins. I am the Deputy Chancellor for the Division of Early Childhood Education at New York City Public Schools. I have the privilege of serving our youngest learners, who I like to call littles. I am also here on behalf of Chancellor Kamar Samuels, and I would be remiss if I didn't shout out my 14-year-old, this mic is not letting me be great. Also a mom of a fantastic 14-year-old daughter, also named Nia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Elvita Dominique. I'm with the Administration for Children's Services, Office of Equity Strategies, and I want to shout out my son now too, who gave me a real tough time this morning, even though he knew I had this panel. But I still love him. 8-year-old Isaac. She, her pronouns, and our office is in the Office of the First Deputy Commissioner at the Administration for Children's Services.
Thanks so much. So I think that, one of the things that we've learned, whether you are a parent or not a parent, or had a father or did not have a father, you realize how important those roles are. And one of the other terms that we sort of came up with or learned was fudge. So we're really thinking about fathers, uncles, dads, grandfathers, everyone to be that father figure and parent figure, because we know that children do better when the adults in their lives are healthy, stable, and supportive. So today I'd really love to hear, I'll start with you, Stephen. New York City is committed to becoming a father-friendly city, the most in the world, and this is across all of our agencies. I'd love to hear what that looks like in your agency in practice and plans.
Yeah, so in the Mayor's Office of Equity, I'll just say MORGE, and you will hear me say MORGE as the acronym for that office often. So in this agency, we have the New York City Young Men's Initiative, we have NYC Her Future, we have the newly established Office of LGBTQ Affairs, and then we also have the Commission on Gender Equity as the primary 4 offices of the agency. And so, you know, in this agency, that looks like what, I love the acronym FUDGE, because in a lot of ways, fathers and father figures, the father figure part is heavy in some of our other offices. But then there's also this piece on community development. We're here with the Department of Youth and Community Development. One thing I used to also be reminded of is that community development part is a big part of family development, is a big part of building healthy families, building healthy fathers, and healthy father models. And so a lot of, like, all of our offices, all of the policy, all of the funding and the programs that the agency that Morge puts forth is establishing strong communities that are ensuring that there is supports for a lot of our more marginalized, especially in Young Men's Initiative. Our whole office is established to close disparity gaps for Black and brown young men. NYC Her Future is doing the same for our young women. And then we have the Office of LGBTQ Affairs that is doing the same, what I like to call for the rainbow. And so if you think about every piece of the puzzle in our agency, we're thinking about these identity markers and how to develop stronger individuals, but also stronger communities around these individuals. So in general, that's how Morge is doing that.
So for New York City Public Schools, you know, I like to remind folks that education is a social determinant of health, right? And when we think about healthy individuals, I think, you know, Shawn shared how that, and Sandra spoke about that building healthy families and healthy communities. And so as part of education, we have definitely, in my particular team in early childhood education, really elevating and leveraging Head Start, which many of you might be aware of, as an opportunity to engage with whole families, including fathers. But it's not about just creating these intentional moments. It's about embedding it into the fabric of what we do as part of our agency, right? When we talk about opportunity, it's not just an aspect of proximity. It's really about building opportunity for fathers to do what we do and what we know they do best, right? It's not about inviting them as being bearing witness, but being partners. And so when we are talking about responsive education, it is making sure that not only are we reflecting our families and communities culturally, but fathers and father figures are seeing themselves in the spaces, maybe through the workforce, maybe it be through our efforts to recruit and build our pipeline to build a sustainable workforce, right? Because our young boys, they need to see themselves in our classrooms. And so we work with a host of other agencies to ensure that our Young Men's Initiative and other efforts where we can really recruit men of color to work in our classrooms. And we're doing that especially in early childhood, where it is a very female-driven workforce. I'm sure we'll get into that a little later, so I'll save the sugar. But in addition to that, you know, it's really lovely working under a chancellor who himself is a man and a father. Very proud immigrant from Jamaica. I'm sure if you heard him, he advertises that frequently. But he brings those experiences into the role that he is as he serves as chancellor. And so when we are curating our branding, our marketing materials, when we are creating spaces for families, we are not treating fathers like an aside. It is not, yes, an intentional invitation, but we are very clear that it's an expectation that they are in the spaces that we create for their children, may it be biological, a niece, a nephew, or otherwise.
So for the Administration for Children's Services, we're really looking at two systems, both child welfare and juvenile justice. And I would say for our agency, we've really been on an evolutionary path with this work. And Mr. Dove spoke before about, you know, how we're really, with the evolution of this work, building on what others have done And before kind of deep diving into your response to this question, I did want to just take a moment to acknowledge my colleague, Tyler James. And I convinced myself when I was preparing this that I could do this all morning and not shed a tear. That was not right, because I cried through everything that was said this morning. So I'm going to try to not cry now, but we'll see what happens. We lost my colleague Tyler James in January. He was the first director of race equity strategies at the Administration for Children's Services. But beyond that, Tyler was just a leader in our agency, and he just cared. He cared about making it fair. So in addition to being the first director of race equity strategies, he was also really prominent in the movement to make our agency more father-friendly. And I'm just so proud that he had the opportunity to see us launch our Office of Fatherhood Engagement with our new director, Scott Leach. I was crying today because he would have been so happy to be here. Like, everything that was being said is just everything he believed in. And yeah, he just would have just thrived in this. And so we think the work that we're doing is going to kind of continue his legacy. So to actually answer the question, part of what we've been trying to do is really understand how we can be more intentional. Historically in child welfare, there's been much more of a focus on the mother side of the relationship, but you know, as research has shown, you know, being able to really engage the whole family brings the best outcomes for the well-being of the child. And so we're looking for ways to ensure, you know, that fathers are included. And research has also shown that when you include fathers, father figures in the paternal side of the family, you know, we are seeing things as there's a shortened amount of time spent in foster care, there are higher rates of reunification, and so we see really positive outcomes. And so we've had over the years, you know, staff advocates. I particularly want to raise up the ACS Fatherhood Working Group that have really looked at our work and tried to identify ways in which we could start having that intentionality to outreach to fathers, and we've had quite a bit of success. So in our Family Permanency Services Division, we have our Teen Specialist Unit that works directly with foster care, young fathers in foster care, helping them navigate child support, mental health services, and find like stable employment, and also giving them the opportunity to really just connect with one another through forums and you know, spaces that they can really uplift each other. And then within our Division of Family Services, which is the division, is this still on? Oh, sorry. Within the Division of Family Services, which is our division that focuses on keeping children safely at home and avoiding further involvement with our child welfare system. We're seeing that they're focused on ensuring that their case planners, when they're assessing a family's needs, are ensuring that they're looking at the whole family and finding models that work with the whole family, even if the father is not present in the home.
That's really great, and thank you so much for bringing up Tyler. I think that one of the things that we loved about the work we did was getting to know so many folks at different agencies, especially Tyler, who are really committed to the work and really helping move it forward. So his loss is great, but I do agree with you. We're moving his intention forward. So I'll start with you, Simone. I'd love to hear a little bit, dig a little deeper into what you're doing at New York City Public Schools to really engage fathers, since we know so many fathers are affected by poverty and incarceration and other sort of systems involvement. Love to hear what you have seen that the schools have been doing.
Yeah. And so really starting again with early childhood education, right? Building pathways for fathers to be welcomed into decision-making roles, right? So we have previously had the Head Start Policy Council, but also using that as a throughway to join our community education councils. They have, our CEC representatives is comprised of family representatives who have authority to make decisions around how we use our buildings, right? Co-locations of schools and other policy matters that impact particularly Chancellor's regulations. We also have been very intentional about recruiting fathers and other male figures on our panel for educational policy. And that is a body who have the authority to make decisions on any contracting matters. And so anytime you hear about a contract with New York City Public Schools, it must undergo PEP review. And we have definitely grown the male participation in both of those. We also have a group who leads our New York City Men's Teach work. And again, as I spoke to earlier, it's about making sure that we capture and reflect men in all aspects of our work. I spoke at length about educators, but we also have a huge tranche of social workers that support the work across our schools, including in early child. I'm still go back to early child education every chance I get. And you know, really thinking about, to your point, when we think about kind of the fragmentation and the fact that there are men who enter into other aspects of the bureaucracy in our system, the work that we do really is about going into community and making sure that those experiences and those moments do not exclude you from being a participant in the lives of your children and part of the fabric of New York City public schools. And so we have Mark Rampersant, who is a huge leader in our work, and he leads I Love Me Some Mark. And he is very, very deliberate about connecting with communities and other community partners to make sure that information is readily shared and available. Again, that issue of access, and so there's lots of work happening throughout the agency, intentional, like I mentioned, initiatives, but also it really is about making sure that in everything that we do around the way that we are welcoming fathers and men into the work is really not kind of a separate activity. It's something that's just part of our normal work.
That's wonderful. We'll go on to Stephen, since you mentioned Young Men's Initiative. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing in this space.
Yeah, so I'll speak more specific to YMI, Young Men's Initiative. As I shared earlier, our whole office, 15 years in the game, has been put in place to close disparity gaps for young Black and brown men. And I'm so glad, Simone, that you mentioned NYC Men Teach, because that is one of the programs that we fund. And as I think about how to push or prop up men and father figures, I'm always thinking about the ways that we can support programs or even establish programs through funded support. And so setting a funding priority agenda is a big part of what we're doing in this office, all the way from making sure that there are father figures and fathers in the classroom. You know, as an educator myself, I can attest to what you said. Education is a very woman-centered or majority populated industry and sector, and so that for our children to see men in the classroom and to start to see those models of manhood, I think that is a huge priority for our office. And when I know we're here to specifically talk about fatherhood, but when I think about fatherhood, I'm really thinking about manhood in a lot of ways, and I'm really thinking about how to strengthen men, and because we know that men can play so many roles in the community and in family dynamics, if you have strong supports for men, then you will essentially be building strong fathers and father figures. And so in addition to NYC Men Teach, we have another program that I'm really excited about that we're actually building right now called NYC Men Heal, which will actually kind of replicate that model into a more mental health support space. So how do we make sure that there are more Black and brown men who are masters of social work, who are licensed mental health counselors? And so if we have healthy and whole men, then we'll hopefully have healthy and whole fathers.
Wonderful. Elvita, would love to hear what ACS is doing in this space to engage fathers.
Yeah, so building on what I was discussing before, which is how we're trying to evolve as an agency, often when folks are encountering our agency, it's at a moment of crisis, it's at a moment of need, it's at a moment of challenge. We know historically how our agency has been perceived, and so part of what we're trying to do is really find ways to meet folks with support. And whether that's support when they've, become involved with our agency already, or if we can bring that support out into the community to ensure that they don't even need to, to interact with us at all, but they have what they, require to face their challenges and to avoid any involvement with us. And so some of the ways that we're doing that: in our Division of Youth and Family Justice, we partner with Inwood House to offer parenting and healthy relationship services to youth that are involved in the criminal justice system. Inwood House has a curriculum focused on reproductive health, autonomy, and boundaries, and so what we're trying to do is really help, even while these young people are engaged with our system, trying to get them, focused on how they can build positive relationships with whomever they're co-parenting with and with their children as well. And then within our Division of Child and Family Wellbeing, they really focus on what we call primary prevention, which is, again, those community-based supports where you can just access what you need and you don't have to have a case or whatever, any kind of involvement with ACS. And they have a number of different programs, including family enrichment centers, which are really these kind of non-office looking, very home-like environment type of centers, almost community centers that are co-designed with community, where any member of the community, including fathers, can walk in and participate in various activities or be, referred to concrete resources if they need them. We also have our Office of Child Safety and Injury Prevention, which really works with fathers to help understand how they can have safe sleep and how they can prevent injury to their children. So again, there's no need to get involved with our system. And then finally, we have our community partnerships, which are a network of local service providers that work together to try to really figure out how to make service access more efficient for community members. And again, these are spaces that fathers can walk in, participate in a community forum, get access, to whatever resources that they need. They host regular engagements that are, specific to fathers. For instance, like our Staten Island Community Partnership hosts a Family Fun Day that's focused on fathers, where they bring together over 2,000 members of the community, over 750 fathers, for them to just, have a positive time with their families and with their children.
Wonderful. So Simone, I'd love to come to you. I know we all know that the new administration, Mayor Mamdani, has a real clear focus on 2K and universal childcare, and we know that with 96% of the teaching population being female, one of the big pieces is about gender equity. I'd love to hear what New York City Public Schools is doing about that.
Yeah, first things first, before even growing the workforce that's going to participate in early care and education, I think we have to make it an economically viable option and career choice. These are very underpaid individuals. And the fact that we are in 2026 and still having these conversations is frankly disrespectful. And what I always say, when we kind of hit the pinnacle of success, none of us would be employed, right? We put ourselves out of jobs, but I'm still here, so we're gonna keep fighting. And so first things first, we need to make it economically viable. And because there hasn't been interest in folks wanting to be early childhood educators. Higher education institutions have been either collapsing or truncating early childhood programs. And so some of the work we're doing, in addition to NYC Men's Teach, right? It's really, again, reminding folks of the business of education, but also the importance of this passion-driven work. But really reaching our high school children now, right? And so we have an Office of Student Pathways, which we are working really closely with the leadership there, going into high schools and encouraging early childhood education as a real viable pathway and career choice for our high school students. Introducing them to what it means, really demystifying it, frankly, right? Because I think when people think about caring for our littles, it's just a nurturing role, but our fathers and our boys can be nurturers and are nurturers too. And so just letting them know what that looks like. Having them come into the classroom. Don't be afraid of the 2-year-old. You know, we all know they are, you know, very, very germy. But they build your immune system, that's why I tell them. But also, you know, when I am deep down in sometimes the politics of my work, I often go to visit programs, and I'm happy to have an early childhood program down at 52 Chambers Street where I can go into the classroom and surround myself with the youngest of our learners. They remind us why we are here and what we do. And so inviting them now while they're in high school, still processing what their interests are. We also have a program called LYFE, L-Y-F-E, and it is located in high schools, and it is for our student parents. They get to have access to care so they can continue their education too. And so, again, making sure that we're breaking down any potential barriers for children to continue their successes, reaching students earlier, making sure that, again, that early child education is a viable pathway. And then only then can we actually really increase the quantity of seats to create universal childcare. We can have an intention to open up additional seats in classrooms, but if we don't have the adults to manage the rooms and be at the administrative levels of these programs, most of them are community-based organizations, to be frank. 60% of our seats are actually in community-based, center-based organizations. We have a huge tranche of programs and home-based programs. Some of you might be familiar with those, and really our youngest learners, particularly our twos, are in home-based settings. And then we have schools, district schools and charter schools that serve our 3- and 4-year-olds. And so we have to, as we are building up early childhood education across the city, including and particularly our 2-year-olds, we have a specific focus on creating a stable and sustainable pipeline of educators, and that is where we are engaging our young people, not just our fathers, but our young men and our students intentionally.
Wonderful. That's a perfect segue to Stephen. You know, a core part of the work we framed as fatherhood. The core way we really framed this is a gender equity and an economic justice issue, right, to engage fathers. And this falls squarely in your agency's wheelhouse. Would love to hear what Marge is doing in this fatherhood strategy and gender equity piece.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ahsia. And we do, Marge reports to the Deputy Mayor for Economic Justice, so it's very appropriate. And I think of this in a couple ways. So I mentioned earlier, in this agency we have the Commission on Gender Equity, and that commission's role is to really lift up policies, and Ahsia and I are both members of that commission, to lift up policies for in a lot of ways, girls, young women, gender non-binary individuals. And so on that panel, on that commission, we have maybe 3 or 4 men out of about, 15? And so just looking at those optics and as being a member on that commission, I'm thinking about 2 things. And not just that being on that commission, but also being the ED of YMI. I'm thinking of how do we support fathers with diverse skill sets as number 1. And then 2, how do we support a diverse population of fathers? And so with that first piece, and I'm so glad Brother Dove mentioned that his oldest is gender non-binary. Because I think, at least how I was raised, and I'm an identifying queer black man, my parents were not equipped to necessarily deal with the nuances of raising a Christian black queer boy. And so as I think about how do we equip our fathers with diverse skill sets, I think about presence on commissions, such as the Commission on Gender Equity, and ensuring that our fathers are in the room when we have public meetings, when we're engaging the community about how we're setting our policy agenda. I'm also thinking about ways that we can bring fathers into the conversation when we talk about gender equity. A lot of times you hear gender equity and you think, oh, that's a women's issue, or that's not my thing, or we're like on the margins of that conversation. And I think men need to be not centered, but center in that conversation with our men, with our women, and our non-binary partners. And so I think that's a big part of equipping fathers with diverse skills. I'm also thinking of some of our funded programs in YMI. We fund CUNY's Fatherhood Academy. And in a lot of ways, we're helping unemployed fathers and underemployed fathers have the skills and the tools they need to succeed in our economy that is very much changing every day. And even in that funding, we're thinking right now, how do we even change the curriculum for programs like that? Because I mean, we can all look around and see how AI is advancing in ways that are changing what the future of career path even looks like. So just those are just some of the examples of how we can diversely, or I guess like equip our fathers with diverse skill set. And then I'm also thinking of how do we equip a diverse population of fathers. You know, I'm an amazing dog dad, so I am not a father, but I'm a father figure, and I'm also a former associate pastor. I was a youth pastor for 3 years down in Houston, Texas. I was a youth pastor in Nashville, Tennessee. I pastored a church in Houston as well after that, and I loved feeling like I was a father figure to so many young folks. And I was also a classroom teacher. I taught 4th and 5th grade. And so I may not be a father in the formal sense, but in a lot of ways, I had the privilege of serving young people and being able to be propped up as a model for a lot of folks in my community. And to me, that means the world. And so making sure that even the fathers in the fudge have a place in this conversation and are looked at as equally, and in some ways, unfortunately, more important than some of the existing father figures. But I do believe that the collective of fathers, father figures, the whole gambit of what it means to be a father is valuable.
Thank you. That was great. So Elvita, I want to say, like, ACS had already started this pathway way before I started looking into it and the fatherhood plan was launched. So I'd love to hear, like, what sparked that and sort of what did that mean for you as an agency?
So I think my theme is that ACS is evolving. You know, we do understand, you know, how we're perceived, but we are hoping, you know, by making these commitments and started a while ago. I mentioned how staff have been really trying to work really initially on their own, almost in a grassroots type of way, you know, getting leadership buy-in into how we can more intentionally work with fathers. We also got push, you know, from outside advocates as well. The momentum built. We, you know, have the creation of the ACS Fatherhood Working Group, and they continue to push. And as I alluded to earlier, we were actually able to launch an ACS Office of Fatherhood Engagement. And what that represents is really a commitment on the part of the agency to really try to spread this work throughout the agency. And we want to invest in it. We want to keep developing it. And with an agency of our size, we really need a centralized office to really push and move the needle and really find ways to ensure that you know, the change becomes embedded. And part of what we're hoping the office can do is really look at policy agency-wide, look at practice, really support all our client-facing divisions in their work, be able to collaborate with city partners, really find ways to harmonize our work as we're trying to, you know, do today, and really also be able to connect with fathers and be able to help create feedback loops directly from fathers in our communities that can then also impact the work of the agency.
Wonderful. So as we wrap up, I'd love to hear from, I'll start with you, Stephen. So what's going to happen next? Like, what's your one priority, practice change, or partnership that you see really essential for the next step for your agency?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our commissioner would agree that funding priorities are a big part of of what we're doing. And so, you know, my team, we have our first team retreat tomorrow, actually, where we're gonna strategize around where our investments should remain. We're a $30 million office, and we have about 20 funded programs across various city agencies. And so one thing that I know we're thinking about is scaling up the effective program models, such as the CUNY Fatherhood Academy, finding ways to expand that program and to, in some ways, enhance it, but then also creating new programs like the one I mentioned earlier, NYC Men Heal. We already have a pilot that we're planning to launch this fall. We have a partner identified. We've already identified 90 Black or brown men who are pursuing Masters of Social Work and or a licensed mental health counseling degrees, and have funded scholarships through what's called the CPT program, Career Pathways Training, through 1199 TEF. And so we're partnering with them to offer wraparound supports for these men to get to and through this program successfully with stipends, mentors, career advising, placement and practicums, and job placement after. Because if we don't have money in our pockets, like Simone was mentioning, like the cost of living is a big part of successful fathering. And so if we can ensure that our men have the tools that they need, not only the skill set, but the actual tangible tools to successfully support families and folks in their community, then I think we've reached a level of success.
Fantastic. Simone?
Yeah, so you know what's next for us is really building upon some of the work that's already underway. And so 4 of the Chancellor's priorities are around academic rigor, safety, integration is kind of his main priority, and then family empowerment. And so really lifting up the work that we're doing, particularly in this time when, again, early learning, it had this like renewed energy around it. And so using this to really be more thoughtful about how we welcome men, fathers, young folk into early childhood education. I am going to labor this intentionally. For families, it is an opportunity for them to first enter the system in early childhood education as their little matriculates. It is also an opportunity to have life-changing experiences for families who would otherwise not have those similar career or job experiences. And so really looking through integration and family empowerment, looking to our families who have been active participants in this work as a potential group of folk who might want to work with us. And so creating pathways, again, understanding that becoming an educator is not necessarily a ladder, but it's a lattice, right? There are different ways you can find yourself and make your way into this work. And so being more thoughtful about recognizing experience in a very thoughtful way as compared to credentialing in education, to create access for families to become educators. And so that's some of the work we're planning to do through the Chancellor's priorities and really lifting upon that for early childhood education initially.
That's great. Elvita?
So to continue our theme of culture shift, which I will keep emphasizing, for us, it really is about moving from these bright spots that I highlighted to consistency within an agency in terms of how we're connecting with fathers. And so we're really looking for, how can we have agency-wide impact? One of the things that we are doing is trying to develop an agency-wide fatherhood engagement policy that would apply to all our client-facing divisions. We're also trying to partner with key client-facing divisions to understand what are some of their challenges with regard to, how they're engaging fathers, including our, Division of Family Permanency Services, which, encompasses foster care, and our Division of Family Services, which actually focuses on keeping children safely at home, to really understand, what models they're using, what are some of the issues that staff are experiencing, and how we can come in and support.
Great. I think I have time for 1 or 2 questions, so if anybody would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand.
My name is Abraham Jones, Executive Director of Claremont Neighborhood Centers. I have a question for, I think, Ms. Simone. You mentioned the LIFE program, and I'm familiar with the LIFE program, which was in high schools for young mothers. young parents. So I like you, if you can just talk a little bit about how fathers engage in that program, because here too, before now, I didn't know of fathers being involved, and I think that's a key opportunity to engage young men, young fathers.
Yeah. So I always butcher the acronym, what LIFE stands for, but I believe it's Living for the Young Families Through Education, I believe. Thank you. And the intention is we don't want students, may they be, you know, mothers or fathers, to drop out of school because they have to care for their child. And so there aren't, you know, LIFE programs in every high school, but there is on our website, and definitely can share it with folks, a link that lists the number and locations of LIFE programs across the city. We are hoping, in a very, you know, intentional, deliberate way, to open more where appropriate, because we need to have the right specs and locations. But when a student is, you know, they feel like they have to make a hard choice between enrolling, and again, it's for boys and girls. They can go to their guidance counselor, they can go on the website, and they can make arrangements to enroll their child in this program. Often they go to the school that the children may also be enrolled in for the early childhood program, because it's like a one-stop shop, but they don't have to be. They can go to another high school and then have that care, and it's free to them. And so we can definitely share more information. And then I think what you're pointing out is, again, our marketing and branding is not necessarily clear and inclusive. And so that's some of the work we have to do to make it clear this is not just for women or mothers, this is for the young boys who might be parents too.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Any other questions? One more? Yeah. Oh, Dr.
So again, my question, sadly, is also for Simone. Do you have an issue of turnover of young men who enter early childhood education and then burn out, and what are your strategies for preventing that?
I love that question. And so our retention data for men is actually, we actually have higher retention for the men who enter into early childhood education. The sad part is they make up, I would say, a very small percentage of that workforce. Where we find men, and often what our data is showing, is that we often recruit a lot more Black men into early childhood education, working in communities where they grew up, and so that kind of cultural responsiveness. I think that's helpful for their retention. We also find that many of them, unfortunately, don't find pathways of growth within the program or the actual sector. And so that's some of the work where we're looking into to build a more thoughtful retention strategy. But a lot few of them are in the work, but they do stay long.
Great. Can I? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Trevor from Chancellor Services, and
We're recording, so.
Yes. Sorry. Hi, I'm Trevor from Child Support Services. I'm one of the outreach specialists. We help the fathers citywide and everywhere we can find them with everything that we can to support them. And there was a time during the Bloomberg time, there was a Responsible Father Coalition that kind of put us in a room with you guys. And of course, we had our thoughts of ACS, and we learned a lot more. And we have a long, deep respect and appreciation of how you support the fathers and education in the space. Because as Board Member joined us in that, we learned a lot of how you guys were reaching to draw our fathers in and for the greater outcomes. So it's just great to see you guys up there. Just appreciate you. I have no question, just thanks.
Thank you. All right, I think we're at time. We'll have time for more questions later, but I will call up the next panel.
This has been a great morning. I'm very appreciative of all the speakers that have preceded us. It's my honor to be here. I'm Mike Bobbitt. I'm Deputy Commissioner for the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, or DYCD. Thank you again for being here and for sticking with us. And just immediately before I came up, someone made a suggestion. I said, you know, you should have an icebreaker at the start of your panel. And so I thought I would keep it very straightforward, very simple. And so I'm going to ask you, before I have the panelists introduce themselves, we know why we're here, the second panel specifically being looking at a father-friendly criminal and legal system. So I ask you, turn to your partner and informed by what our keynote said, when we're thinking about being 10 times bolder, what do you think that would mean for New York City? What would it mean to have a father-friendly criminal legal system? So I'm gonna ask you to do a very quick pair share, maybe like 30, 45 seconds, and you turn to your partner 30, 45 seconds, go. 10 times bolder, what would that mean?
10 times bolder.
What would that mean? I would just say it's providing support to everybody, fathering specific support to everybody in the legal system. Jails and prisons.
That's what they're doing, by the way. That's what I've been talking to them about.
Awesome.
They're running father programs behind bars.
That's awesome.
I would say that it took them with all the kids, the fathers were trapped in the Western society. Dealing with traps. Talking like, you just take a barrier. It's like the father doesn't interfere with the father. There's the financial side. The guy is making that money. Find his way through the maze.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think that draws us all in.
Locked out in that one way.
And what I'm going to ask you to do is hold further conversation for now because we want to make sure we have time to hear from our actual panelists. And when the panel is over, if we have time in Q&A, we'll see how much time we have, but it would be interesting to hear from a couple of you and sort of what you've put in the space where you're seated and what you've heard. But I'm going to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, and I have a few questions. So we'll start first with Nell Colón, our Deputy Commissioner from the Department of Corrections. Welcome.
Hello, welcome. So my name is Nell Colón. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Division of Programs and Community Partnerships over at the New York City Department of Correction. I am so honored to be here, and just to emphasize that Commissioner Stanley Richards is an amazing man, he's an amazing father, and he's an amazing leader. We are so fortunate to have him at the helm of the Department of Correction, and on his behalf, I just want to thank all of you for working and collaborating with us so that we can improve the criminal justice system in New York City. But we are here today to uplift various programs that are happening on Rikers, and I look forward to talking about them. Thank you.
No. Just clap it up for now. And next, it's my pleasure to welcome Francis Paris Abadessa from HRA, from DSS HRA, Office of Child Support Services. Fran, welcome. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Francis Paris Abadessa from HRA, Office of Child Support Services, and I want to, in particular, thank Mike and Ahsia for inviting the child support program to speak today. I always am thrilled to have that opportunity to talk about the child support program. I couldn't be more pleased to be part of this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's clap it up for Fran. And last but not least, welcome Liberty Aldrich from New York City Child Wall Center. Glad you're here.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. It's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. As Mike just said, my name is Liberty Aldrich. I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Law Center in New York. I'm sort of here as a little bit of a switch hitter, or I don't know what that word is, but I also am a former family court judge in the Bronx, and so we'll be answering from a couple of different hats. But it's great to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Let's clap it up for Liberty. And so our first question considers how we've framed, or how New York City has reframed justice systems as gateways to family stability. And so I want to say New York City is increasingly treating the courts, child support system, and corrections not just as enforcement systems, but as critical touch points for family stability. And so I want to ask the panelists from their respective perspectives, what are some ways your agencies, or agencies with which you're familiar, are already shifting practice to recognize fathers as caregivers? And how has that shift benefited children, co-parents, and helped promote community safety? I'll start with you now.
Thank you. So as many of you know, one of the most insidious effects of incarceration is that a father is absent from their family. We have just under 7,000 men and women who are incarcerated on Rikers Island, probably over 6,500 of them men, many of them able-bodied men who are absent and separate from their families. And I think for us as an agency, it's looking at how do we bring people together in the most meaningful way possible that doesn't continue the effects and the impacts of incarceration on children and on the co-parent or guardian or loved one who is supporting the family while that father is in custody. So part of that is a few different initiatives around visiting. One of the big initiatives that we pushed a few years ago was in partnership with the Children's Museum of Manhattan, really revolutionizing how we conduct visits for fathers and their children, and mothers and their children, actually just parents broadly. But bringing men outside of Rikers Island to have a visit with their children for a full day at the Children's Museum of Manhattan, and the success of that partnership and that program has expanded it to the Brooklyn Children's Museum this past year in 2025, in August of 2025, which was incredibly impactful. To be able to make it easier for families who might live in Brooklyn to meet with their family, their loved one who is incarcerated, and again, in a day that is not on Rikers Island. It's profound. That partnership with the Children's Museum of Manhattan also led to us renovating our visit spaces. We are halfway done. Our renovation of our visit spaces include making museum-grade interactive experiences for children, both in our waiting areas and on the visit floor, so that when a father is visiting with their children, they have something to do with them. Something that's not just sitting at a table with a barrier or plexiglass between them, but they have an activity, they have a way to interact and engage with their child that makes sense for their child. So keeping the family front and center. And as a part of that, we also have hired visit facilitators who support that work. They provide snacks for children, coloring books, coloring sheets. Again, how do we bring the parenting part of that visit front and center? And then the work that we really do behind those visiting experiences is with actually one of the team members who I have here with me, Joseph White, is creating and leading fatherhood groups for men to learn parenting skills and also really hone their skills around being a co-parent while they're incarcerated, and what that means for them, and processing those feelings. We talked about having a safe space for feelings, but processing that in a way that is meaningful with their peers and facilitated through trained counselors and men who are leaders in our agency. But whereas there's more to say, I will stop myself there, but really just, again, trying to bring families at the front and center of the work that we're doing with the men and women who are in our custody.
Thank you, Nell. Let's turn it to Francis next. France, all right.
Either one. So, as some of you may know, the child support program has the authority to bring a case to court for what's called a violation petition. So if a non-custodial parent is not paying their child support, there's a number of administrative remedies that are available to the program, but there's also judicial remedies. As a policy, there are two groups of people we serve in the child support program. One are those who are on cash assistance, and for those individuals, they assign their rights to the child support program. And it is, if there's a need to bring them to court, it's the child support program that brings them to court and would file a violation petition. The other group that we serve are those families who come to us voluntarily and wish to establish a child support order. And when a non-custodial parent is not paying and our administrative enforcement does not work, the custodial parent has the authority or will bring their own violation petition to court. Now, on the cash side, on the DSS side, our side, the first group that I referred to, we very rarely will bring a case, a violation petition to court. Sometimes if we do, it is a way of trying to connect someone to employment from the court's perspective. And we have a specific program, and I'll talk about that in a second. Unless the case, what I was going to say is egregious. So we do have some, sports players. We have some music stars who owe like millions of dollars to their custodial parent, and usually they're not on cash assistance, but nevertheless we will help try to prosecute those cases. But unless you fall into that extreme rubric, generally we're not bringing cases to court to request incarceration. If we do, it's to request employment. However, what we have in partnership, we created with the Family Court and with the Center for Court Innovation, a program. It's called Parent Support Program. And the court is there intentionally to serve non-custodial parents who are before the court for a violation petition. And that simply means they have not been paying their child support. And what the court will do, they have an option of referring them to this program. And the whole purpose of this program is to recognize that the reason why they're not paying their child support may not be because they are unwilling to intentionally, but because they're unable to. And so the program actually meets with the non-custodial parents, does an assessment to see, what are their barriers to paying child support? Perhaps they have a substance abuse problem, perhaps they have a housing problem, who knows what the myriad of reasons could be. And the intent is these caseworkers or case managers are supposed to be connecting them to community services to help reduce those barriers. Some of them just need some prodding, need some resume writing, need some nudging, and they get referred to what's now called our Career Track employment program to try to connect them to jobs. And they stay in this program for 9 months. And they meet with a support magistrate periodically to ensure that they're moving along on their path to graduation. And you graduate after making 6 months of child support payments. The program, while not everyone participates, those who do, it does pretty well. I didn't bring the numbers with me, unfortunately, but we do secure jobs for many non-custodial parents, and they end up paying. And on the graduation, we have graduations that are so touching, to listen to the fathers and how grateful they are that this program exists, that we took the time to connect them to employment, how they felt bad and guilty in some ways, which is really the horrible part. Because they weren't paying their child support, they didn't feel they could see their children, which sort of breaks your heart, and which is why this type of program and the other programs that we have in place are just so important. Because one philosophy we have is we never want child support to be the reason why someone does not see their children. And we work very hard to reduce those barriers and keep trying to be creative in ways that we can make certain that that doesn't happen.
Thank you, Fran. And let's turn to you, Liberty.
Thank you. And Fran, I wonder who you started that program with. Okay, so I just want to say that the Children's Law Center represents children only. We don't represent their parents. We don't speak for their parents. We speak only for the children, and we are directed by our clients just the way any other attorneys are directed by their clients. So what that means is we have 8,000 kids a year that we represent, so more than ACS. Kids in foster care. These are not kids in foster care. These are kids in custody, visitation, guardianship, order protection cases. And what I would say as someone who worked on a lot of programs before I took the bench, on the bench, and now in my role as executive director of the Children's Law Center, is that so many of the mistakes that we see that get made in systems are from people assuming they know something without knowing something. So you'll see where, a case, nobody looked for the dad, or the dad wasn't given the opportunity to come, and the child was maybe left with somebody that child didn't want to be with. So we speak for our clients. Our clients often want to have relationships with their fathers regardless of anything else, regardless of whether they're incarcerated, regardless of whether they're paying child support. That's not what they're thinking about. They're thinking about wanting to have their father in their life, whether, as spoken about earlier, whether they're waking up with them or not. That's not even the thing. You know, if it's a phone call, if it's a visit, whatever it is, that's what most of our clients are looking for. I did want to give, last week we had, just to give you an example, a case that resolved after 3 years. I would say that many fathers that I heard from when I was on the bench felt that cases dragged on because they were fathers. That is unfortunately not true. Cases drag on in family court because family court is extremely slow in resolving these issues, and they can drag on regardless. But I would say that that is a feeling that a lot of people have. They have a lot of frustration. It feeds into the kind of thing Fran was just talking about you feel hopeless, you feel mad, you feel frustrated. So, but a case that we had, it was 3 years. Our client had been placed with her aunt when her mother disappeared, basically. No one really, you know, the dad didn't have the opportunity to participate in that. She finally met with her attorney, disclosed abuse by her aunt. We immediately filed for an order to show cause to place her with her dad. And again, it took us a couple of years, but last week we got a final order of custody for her dad. That is what it means to us to be driven by our clients. We are there to represent them. We don't assume anything about whether, you know, a father is not appropriate somehow. That is not at all where we are looking. So we're looking at the court system and the intervention as a way to support our clients or the children. We say that we're looking to empower them to understand that their voices matter. They don't have to just go along with what somebody tells them they're supposed to do. They get to have input into their critical relationships in their lives, and that means certainly with their fathers.
Thank you, Liberty. Thank you, panelists. And your final anecdote reminds me, and Elvita, I'm thinking of some of your former colleagues like Will Henry and ACS with the left trading, locating, engaging fathers, training, and trying to help our colleagues and systems rethink that, you know, if you're engaging a youth, maybe they have a father, and maybe the father has parents before you look beyond the family to support our children. Thank you so much for your anecdote. Now let's turn to fatherhood programs and ways we can make that work count across systems. So New York City is invested in parenting and fatherhood programs, including in settings like jails and reentry settings, and in the community. Point of privilege, I'm proud that with Nell's cooperation, UIC and corrections, we piloted work. Fatherhood and motherhood programs as well. Very excited about that for our part. From your vantage point, what would it take for courts, the child welfare system, and child support systems to more consistently recognize these programs through credit, consideration, or coordination, so fathers aren't starting from zero each time they enter a new system? And what's the single biggest barrier to getting there? Let's start with you, Fran.
It's a single barrier, right? But I could talk about 4 ideas.
Sure, please.
I won't expand on all of them. Maybe I won't expand on a couple. But one thing is we have a program that's called Parent Success. And what the Parent Success program does, it partners with State Department of Health, OASIS, and it says any non-custodial parent who is a participant of an OASIS substance abuse program, if they complete that program in good standing, they can receive $7,500 in child support debt forgiven. But it's only debt owed to the Department of Social Services. We've recently expanded that program to include non-custodial parents who successfully complete our career track employment program. They too would be eligible for $7,500 credit. And the thought was perhaps, if we require, there's the barrier, state support, expanding into other venues. So for example, let's talk about corrections, maybe it's probation. Maybe if a probation person completes whatever, I don't know enough about probation, but whatever they're supposed to complete to graduate from probation, not the right term.
Getting close.
They too can get a similar type of credit towards their debt owed to the Department of Social Services. Maybe it's tying into DYCD's fatherhood programs. Somebody completes a fatherhood program and they owe money to the Department of Social Services. So that would be number one. Two,
get feedback, because the programs that we should be providing people are programs that they want and programs that they need. And so we need to be taking that information in. And I think the third part of this is that we need to be hiring people with lived experiences to work in our system. And that is something that we are doing. That is something that, I could even say for myself, with lived experience in the criminal justice system, it is of deep importance to me. And I think bringing in organizations, if you're not working directly for the department, if you're not, on the side of the government, it's us making sure that we're partnering with agencies that are uplifting credible messengers. It's us uplifting different organizations like the Fortune Society and the Osborne Association and all of those nonprofits that specialize in supporting reintegration, and having those folks at the table, having working groups that involve those voices, and having people then doing the work in our jails.
I wasn't on the panel, but I'll say briefly, DYCD for its part, we do some of the things that Nell has pointed to, so we don't release or request for proposals without doing stakeholder feedback. So we ask people who have been served. So for instance, we have a fatherhood initiative. We've asked dads who've been in the fatherhood initiative what the experience is like before we reiterate. Also, if you are contracted with DYCD to operate a fatherhood initiative, can you raise your hand? DYCD happens to work through community-based organizations, so we take feedback from them. How well are we operating the contract to allow you to do what you need to do? I'm not saying it's perfect, but I am saying it is participatory, and we try to reflect what you were upholding. Thank you for indulging us a few extra minutes. Clap it up for the panel one more time.
Welcome to, again, the second installment of our Fatherhood Symposium. With New York City Children's Cabinet out of the Deputy Mayor's Office, and for panel 3 of this afternoon's offering father-friendly curriculums. So again, thank you for joining us today. Thanks again to Ahsia, Badi, and the entire Children's Cabinet team, the Mayor's Office, for providing this opportunity to discuss the work of colleges and universities as they continue to grow in their intentionality of preparing the next generation of health and human services providers to be prepared to understand the value of fathers in the strengthening and thriving of families and children, and to really acknowledge what we all know, that fathers want to be involved in healthy ways in the lives of their children, and in fact are involved in the lives of their children. And I also want to thank DYCD, I hope I can remember everyone's names, but Sarah Zeller Berkman and so many others who established the Youth Studies Certification Program out of DYCD so many years ago, where youth services professionals have really continued to be equipped and skilled with all the things they need to continue to grow in their service of fathers and families and communities. And finally, as we prepare to begin today's conversation, I think it's important to give a little context that back in 2014, the New York City Human Resource Administration's DSS Office of Child Support Services, we were, you heard from one of the subject matter experts Trevor Alexander, who was at the time with our outreach unit, they were going out to all the CBOs making presentations on child support. And that was great. But we realized that with the high turnover that we were seeing in these community-based organizations, it really was not going to be a sustainable effort. And so we knew that we needed to do something and collaborate with some other entity that would really move this work forward in a deeper and wider way. And so we thought we knew that, generally speaking, schools of social work were not necessarily being very intentional in preparing those in their schools to understand that fathers were a valuable part of the family unit. And we weren't sure about that, so we went and asked the deans of social work schools and met with the deans of social work school and the dean of that group, that consortium, and they confirmed our suspicions. And that led us to partnering with the Silverman School of Social Work at Hunter College, developing the Fatherhood social work curriculum that has taken on different iterations, which is always the idea. So it's got some different names now. And it was then delivered at Columbia University, Stony Brook University, and there are ongoing conversations with our colleagues at Hunter College, Silverman School of Social Work as well. And so that's just a little bit of context for why we're here today. We really want to, beyond social work schools, look at all colleges and universities, again, of how they can be more thoughtful and intentional in embedding father-friendly practice, father-friendly instruction in all of their curriculum. And so with that, I will turn to our panelists to please just go one by one, take a minute or so to say your name, introduce yourself, say what institution you represent, and why you're part of this work. I'll start with you, Dr. Hayward, yes.
We'll do this. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. I'm just getting over a cough. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Hayward. I am an associate professor at the School of Social Welfare at Stony Brook University. Stony Brook is located out on Long Island, but we do have a Manhattan campus where we educate master's level social work students. So I've been teaching an iteration of the curriculum that Alan mentioned. We call it Fathers and Families, Policy and Practice. We have integrated it as a standalone elective into our curriculum at Stony Brook. So since 2019, I think I've had over 250 students in that course coming out. It's a very popular class. My own interest in father involvement stems from personal experiences, as well as my work in child welfare as a social worker, where I saw in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was just no consideration for the role of fathers in children's lives, especially children who were impacted by child welfare services. So this work is really personal to me, and I've had the pleasure of seeing students' eyes open to just a different perspective. In social work, we just tend to be very maternal-centered, especially child welfare education, and to see students have the realization that this is a population that matters, and that it's something that they can focus their career on has been very rewarding. I did just want to say one last thing about myself is that I graduated with my MSW from Hunter in 1999. And I did my project, my final project, looking at fatherhood programs in New York City, and they were few and far between. So just to see the growth over the last, how many years? Couple decades is amazing. So I just really applaud everybody in this room that's doing the work.
Good afternoon. My name is Ronald Mincy. I'm an emeritus faculty member at Columbia University School of Social Work, where have been doing research over the past 30 years and one of the co-creators of a survey called Future Families and Child Wellbeing Survey, which has followed a cohort of children who were born in 1996 over their course of their lives. They're now 27 years old, and we have researchers all over the country now studying the intergenerational consequences of fatherlessness.
Good afternoon. Yeah, my name is Florida Midstein, and I'm with him. It's been a long study of the fatherhood issue. My background is in public urban policy, and when one started looking at fatherhood and having my own fatherhood issues, like, really? And but after a while, I come to really understand what was happening, and also looking primarily at not my own life, but the fact that we had 2 sons and how we wanted them to be, how we expect them to perform as fathers, and we had rules and regulations in our house about that. But what was exciting for me was actually working with NPCL, get information quietly. But I began to teach fatherhood. We taught a lot about child support and all of those. So every time I hear Frank talk, I'm always excited about the new things that we're trying to accomplish. But it said a great deal about who fathers are and what and how we should be able to help them, whether it's in the academic realm or in programs that are designed for them. So looking forward to your talk. Oops, sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pat Gray, and I am at the Silverman School of Social Work as a doctoral lecturer, and also newly elected president for the National Association of Social Work. When I met Alan said to me that Hunter created the curriculum for the fatherhood program, and that I needed to talk to Dr. Mallon. Dr. Mallon handed me the curriculum and said, yes, we created the curriculum, and now you need to figure it out. No joking aside. So, as a Caribbean woman, right, who have a son, 2 children, but I have a son, and I won't tell you how old he is, but he always says to me, Mommy, you think you know too much. And so, for me, that has propelled me a lot in my work, starting out in foster care back in the 90s. And so to see the morph in talking about that in the classroom, I teach practice lab on both the BSW and MSW side. My student over there is here. And recently, he started talking in the classroom about how men are perceived in schools and what are some things that we needed to do. And so he had to do a project. We are doing role plays. And I said to Terry, talk to the black men that are in the room, bring them up, and do the role plays about how we're engaging men. And so it was so powerful. And so, Alan, I say that to say that we are talking about it. And I promise that we will as a classroom on how we work with men through the students at Hunter.
Yes, please, put your hands together for our participants. Thank you so much. So jumping right in, all these questions are going to be directed to all of you, so you just jump in, get in where you fit in, and it's going to be a great conversation, so we look forward to it. So looking at really siloed electives to shared responsibility, right? And shared responsibility amongst all of us as city agencies and service providers and academics. But fatherhood content often lives experiences developing and sustaining fatherhood courses. What are the most effective strategies for integrating a fatherhood lens across required coursework so it becomes a core competency rather than a niche specialty?
So I wish I had knew my colleagues back in the day when we were trying to develop a fatherhood course, and we'll talk more about that later, because she now is the president of the National Association of Social Workers. I mean, that would have been represented a sea change in getting a course that we were trying to develop integrated in the curriculum. However, the School of Social Work at Columbia University is known for its work on policy, and I was a policy wonk. And so our basic policy course had plenty of opportunity to insert discussions of fatherhood in the sections of the policy course that were on child welfare, child support, TANF, and the like. And so when I taught that course, I had a field day, because it was possible to insert in a required course for all the students who were seeking an MSW, the fatherhood work in the sections of the Social Security Act that were basic to our policy course. Then, when Fran came along and began to incite schools in New York to create a fatherhood course, that's where we ran into trouble. And I'll let Dr. Minson talk more about that.
Yeah, it was exciting for me to be able to, put together, look at the curriculum, change the curriculum to make it work for the students that we were dealing with at Columbia. And we soon discovered that, I soon discovered that so much of what was going on in the School of Social Work was towards, women and mothers, but not, to fathers. So here we come with a curriculum that says that, wait a minute, this is a family. We need to be able to include, fathers, and we need to be able to provide the kind of information that is going to not only, help, the mothers, but also help the fathers. But more importantly, the children needed to be able to experience both parents. And how would we do a program like that? So for me, when I looked at the curriculum, and again, my background is in public and urban policy. I am not a social worker, so I had to redo some homework here to make it work. And what I actually ended up doing after the first semester, going by the program that you guys have created, and we found that we had students who, this is going to be this is an elective course. It's going to be easy, and I'm not even the professor, so that's not what it's about. It's about getting the information, understanding your role as a social worker, understanding your role as it's demonstrated to children and and family as a whole. So I became known as well, she's a hard professor. She makes you work and read information. But one of the things we noticed up front that we did not get the kind of support that we needed to get from the administration in providing this course. So we ended up by having to I made some changes in the course that would encourage others to come along. And again, we had COVID, so my students were international. They're in different parts of the world during the first part of the course. But when the course got back on campus, we ran into some issues because, again, there was not the kind of support that I would have expected to get from the administration.
So let me explain this part. So in schools of social work, when you introduce a new course, it's a trial period in order to insert the course in the curriculum. And we had a 3-year trial period to get that done. If we had known somebody who was in the National National Association of Social Workers that integrates with all social work programs around the country, we would have had a lot of guidance about how exactly to do what was required in order to have NSAW approve that course so that it could sort of sustain the accreditation of the Columbia School of Social Work, and we didn't. And so we had some administrative glitches that occurred during COVID, and as a consequence, we lost we had some glitch that we had like 10 students registered for the course, and some computer error, poof, they went away, and that caused our 3-year trial period to fail, and then it disappeared. But we had a well-developed curriculum developed by faculty members around New York City. We had solid research based upon the work of many scholars. And I think it's entirely possible to do that, but it's required to work closely with the National Association of Social Workers in order to satisfy the requirements of the curriculum. The last thing I will say is, in the end, schools of social work need to place students in jobs, and that's the other thing I want to talk about when we have an opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mincy. For us at Hunter, we did not create a fatherhood course, right? But as social workers, we talk about persons and environment continuously. And so because I teach Practice Lab and the Early Childhood program on Saturdays, guess what? I talk about families. And in those conversations, we must include that. We must include the extended family. Someone said earlier that the families are not just the nuclear group, but also extended, right? So how then do we look at a curriculum or a class and train social workers and not talk about that? How do we talk about returning children home and they're at the paternal grandmom's home, right, for kinship placement, and we're not talking about that? That just didn't make any sense to me. So as we continue to talk about this curriculum, Alan, and what it is that we're doing through Hunter, yes, I'm at NASW, and yes, I'm making sure that we're going to pilot a course at Hunter. But we're also going to talk to NASW and make sure that through CSW, the Council on Social Work Education, that we're going to figure out how we make sure that we're getting this sustainable, right? So I look forward.
Sure.
The only thing I would add to everything, so I do teach this class as a standalone elective, but in thinking about how to integrate the material into the entire curriculum, I think the use of the case studies and the use of the videos that were made excuse me, in developing this class could be integrated across the curriculum. So there's a series of YouTube videos that were created by Hunter and the city where it's dads talking about their experiences. So social work is moving to using, I'm blanking on the name, but like the patient, the role play, and vignettes, and using actual people like playing the role of clients. So I think we need to make sure that we're addressing the needs of fathers across those.
No, thank you so much. And what I'm hearing is that in addition to these effective strategies for integrating a fatherhood lens, it's also being very clear from the onset that as a champion, you need to be very aware of how the game is played. That you have to be very clear about that. And and it sounds like that while there are things that must be put in place as per NASW or CSWE, it also is contextual and nuanced depending on the institution. So anyone who we're going to try to tap as a champion, it's going to be important that we work very close with them to understand what their institution requires and support them whatever way we can and figure out the needs of area up front if we can. And then clearly, it even sounds like what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Haywood, that we might want to think about ways to do vignettes that are sort of, updated for 2026 and beyond. Because these stories, they age well, but it's probably also good to think about ways to keep doing and adding iterations based on the way that fatherhood and family is changing.
Can I just add to that?
Please.
So we think stuff ages well, but every year the students are younger, and I said something in class this semester, I said 1996 wasn't that long ago, and then...
They weren't born yet.
Yeah, so we think stuff looks current, but even the production value, I really think it does make sense to keep upgrading, even if it still looks good to our older eyes.
Thank you for that real talk, Dr. Haywood. That's right. Thank you. And so, as looking at now preparing students for the realities of fatherhood engagement, and we touched on it a little bit here, but if you could all talk more about, as many graduates certainly enter child welfare, workforce development, behavioral health, or reentry settings where fathers feel mistrusted, penalized, or invisible. What specific skills, mindsets, or experiential learning opportunities should universities prioritize to prepare students to engage fathers who are navigating trauma, incarceration, poverty, or systemic bias?
So one of the things that I think is critical to understand is, there's the education that goes on in schools of social work, but there's also placement. And so until 12 o'clock, we had in the audience the director of field placement at Columbia School of Social Work. And his job is to identify placements throughout New York City and beyond for the MSW students to work so that they gain some practical experience in their profession. He had to leave before this panel, but I encourage you. His name is James Singletary. He gave me his name. I'll pass his information about as well as his email address. And he's interested in connecting with fatherhood programs and city agencies that work with fathers in order to facilitate placements. That's his idea one. Idea two is students in social work at the master's level have to go through an accreditation after it's all continued learning. And so there's another opportunity to continue their course experience in this field. And the final thing I would say is there is a plethora of research, much more than there was 30 years ago when I began this work. The research on fatherhood is well grounded now. I will say myself, I have a book coming out called Money and Love, how fathers help children develop. And so the collaboration of psychologists, developmental psychologists, economists, and the like grounds the research on fathers much better than it was the case 30 years ago when I began. And therefore, there is the sound academic material that could facilitate the coursework that is necessary in order to make the field legitimate to any school of social work anywhere around the country. And there are graduate students who are now senior professors all over the United States who are doing part of this research as a result of the work that we've created.
So I place all the BSW students at Silverman School of Social Work in internships. And the BSW students have both care coordination and child welfare as their area of concentration. And so when the person mentioned earlier Osborne, we have students that are placed at Osborne, at Cases. Other organizations that will train social workers to work with the incarcerated pop, right? But it's not only the fathers that are incarcerated. We're talking about which other groups that I need to contact with to make sure that I'm providing you with internships. And as the director for the program, that you have me as the liaison at Silverman, that I'm making sure that those placements are goodness of fit. We talk about that continuously. If students are not goodness of fit, we can change, right? There's nothing that says you stay, we can change. And so what are some things that we need to do together as the person who is responsible for internship? The other piece of my role, and I have a very diverse portfolio at Silverman. I am also the director of continuing education. So, any organization who wants to do CE around fatherhood, come see me.
Thank you.
The only thing I'll add to that, I definitely want to reiterate about the practicum placements, because I think that is where so much social work education takes place, and being able to increase the number of places that we can place students to get experience working with fathers. And then I just had a note about the father-friendly checklist, because that is an assessment tool that is a part of the Fathers and Families course curriculum. And it asks students, and I use it as part of my class, and ask them to assess either their place of work or their practicum placement across leadership, organizational development, program, and community engagement around serving fathers. So that's just one way that students can really reflect on where they are, even if it's not in a father-serving practicum placement.
Just want to add something else to this. One of the things that we noticed over at Columbia was that they placed a lot of students in schools, whether high school, elementary, or that kind of thing. And what I saw was that a lot of the students, even though they were in academics, they weren't trained to deal with certain certain behaviors, certain situations that students were dealing with, whether it's incarceration of the parents, or I have to share this story. In the class one day, I was a student, I don't remember what the question I asked, and the student said to me, well, I had this child who was about 10 or 12 years old in the class, and she must have asked him what he wanted to do when he grow up. And his answer was, he wanted to be a baby daddy. And so now I'm on it. Okay, what did you do with that question? Where did you go? And she said, I was struck, I couldn't answer. And it had so much, as she'd been given the information or trained the way she should have been trained, even in her early social work program, she would have been able to work and navigate, take that question and build on that question, encourage that child, even the comments that, what's a baby daddy? You would start there, and you realize, again, that there was some fatherhood issue that child was having, that he wanted to grow up to be that, because that child has an expectation of what a father should be. And as for social workers, you have to be, how should I say, you have to have the foundation, because you don't know what kind of experiences you're going to come up against. So you ought to be able to answer and navigate, moving forward.
Thank you for that. And it sounds, even more specifically, a real sense of cultural humility and competence that has to be developed. And by culture, I don't just mean the ethnicity, right, but also culture in terms of neighborhood, borough, city, right, state, just all the different things that you can begin to wrap your heads around in terms of how to approach someone in a nuanced way, a thoughtful way. And then, Dr. Hayward, you mentioned the father-friendly checklist done by the National Fatherhood Initiative, and I think for them, it could be just that. It could be the checklist, right? But I think you can also work with NFI to do something a lot deeper of a dive, where they will really go into your entire organization and begin to really look under the hood in terms of what's happening, talk with your staff, survey your staff, et cetera, et cetera. So they actually made a presentation. Ahsia mentioned the interagency meetings that they're doing with us, and that was presented to us, so it's definitely a good resource. And then even to underscore, again, Dr. Flona, your comment, I think that's really going to be key. How can we really make sure that social work students are really prepared to engage with the communities, with all the various experiences that are going to come to bear? So thank you. So in terms of bridging academia and community-based fatherhood practice, so community-based fatherhood programs often operate under different constraints than universities: burnout, turnover, and limited funding. So how can academic institutions better align the curriculum, field placements, and partnerships with the lived realities of fatherhood? It's a bit of a follow-up on the last conversation, but a little bit more. Right, the lived realities of fatherhood practitioners to ensure students graduate ready for real-world implementation. So let's dream a bit.
Well, I think one question that arises in this is that, one of the things that we've let slip in this conversation is master's level programs that were the case at the Columbia University and BSW programs, right? So that when my colleague James Singletary places a student in a field placement, there has to be someone there who is a master's in social work in order to supervise that student. And that was often a major impediment to that. And so in moving forward with him, one of the things that we have to work out is, again, how the alignment of who supervises the student connects with the requirement that there be a supervisor there who has an MSW. That's a big issue. And you know, frankly, I've been jealous of that you've been able to enroll 100 students in your course. It's amazing, but that's because it's at the BSW level when students are much earlier in their career, exploring what they're interested in, and therefore there's a widespread interest in other things, so that you get them, when you get them before the MSW level, you have an opportunity to catch them earlier in your career trajectory in terms of what they know. And I think passing then those students from the BSW programs onto the MSW programs is something that we have to work on as well. And there are also courses in evaluation of interventions, period. And that's another opportunity to connect MSW students who have we lost a student at Columbia just a few years ago who was a PhD in social work. He did work on interventions, worked for MDRC, and then sadly his name was Bright Sarfo. He passed away. But again, building the infrastructure of students who are moving from the BSW level to the MSW onto the PhD, so that they're building not only research and credibility, but also are working in the organizations that are working on this, so that they can in turn become the supervisors of the students who then would move forward.
And that's such a key piece, right, Dominique? Because if you don't have a licensed social worker in your programs, it's very difficult to get students. However, some of the things that the schools of social work are doing now, and I can speak for Hunter, that there are some situations where we've identified a social worker on the school end and placed them to do the supervision in your organization, right? So please, let's have the conversation. Don't let it be a hindrance if you're willing to take students. We can talk about it. I can go back to my dean and I can say, okay, I have 3 or 4 agencies who are doing fatherhood work and they want to take some BSW students. Can I get a social worker from our school to become the practicum instructor? And then I teach CIFI, right? The CIFI course that they need to get certified. So please, let's talk about it. Talk to the schools of social work about what it is that you need in order to accept our students, right?
This is amazing too. Did you want to say something, Dr. Hayward? Go ahead.
I was just going to say something about the supervision piece. So we have the same challenge, but as the schools of social work have expanded into new areas like library social work, higher education, and then we place students in the fatherhood program that I work with, and then we're able to do group supervision with all the students who are kind of in a program that doesn't have necessarily a licensed social worker. So I think that if the schools are being flexible and expanding, that they should be able to provide supervision. If that's maybe group supervision, they're paying somebody on the outside to provide it.
And thank you for those, particularly the last 2 comments, because what I'm hearing is also that it sounds like schools are willing to be flexible and willing to have the conversation. For everyone in the audience to appreciate, when we first started this conversation back in 2014, 2017, in recent subsequent years, this was not happening. Beyond that, there wasn't a panel of folks. It wasn't being made as clear explicitly, right, that social work schools are not only willing to work with CBOs and organizations, and certainly folks in the audience may have already known that, but for it to be said publicly and also be made clear, look, we're willing to work with you and nuance what the need might look like depending upon your organization, right, and also depending on the institution. That might have been known to some people, but not being made clear more broadly, right? And so we're very excited to, I think, hopefully make this sort of standard operating procedure, and that organizations know that this is a resource and that those students can go on and continue to receive the CEs and get the professional development that they need. And also, it's also clear that just as important as the curriculum piece, again, the infrastructure. So anyone that wants to be a champion of this work here in New York State and beyond, it's going to be important to build that infrastructure and be clear about what that is.
And again, I think the very spread of the Fatherhood Initiative itself in New York, from 2014, that now we have, ACES has taken this on formally, will send a signal. Again, in the end, master's degree programs need to find a way to have placements for their students so that they can find employment. And so there is a real win-win here that wasn't the case in 2014, and I hope we really exploit that opportunity.
And just one other thought, not just the school of social work, but the schools that teaches, like policy, public policies and that, because I worked with both sides, and it was amazing to see, I shouldn't say this, but the students in the policy program, they were just so head on. They just, bought this stuff, they were ready to work on. It was different between those students and the social work students, because the social work students has just, bottom line, there's some development that needs to be there that was not there that, that we saw in the other schools, and the master's level.
But absolutely, and I guess, sorry, my brain just went a minute ago. I'll hopefully come back to that. But no, this is a very rich conversation, and we hopefully we can build on what's being said here. And I think what I was going to say is that, as you said, Dr. Flona, that this is beyond the social work schools, and I think that's this point number 7, right, in the 10-point plan, is really to go beyond, yes, social work schools, but then all other institutions as well. How can they be more thoughtful about their curricula and father-friendly instruction and practice? Our final question, and this is, again, giving you an opportunity as folks so steeped in this work to really dream a little bit along with the folks in the audience, and I think we're going to have time for questions, is to really see that if New York City is serious about becoming a father-inclusive city, as we heard, the most father-friendly city in the world, right? What is one concrete action that universities, accrediting bodies, or city agencies should take in the next year to ensure fatherhood engagement is embedded in how we recruit, train, and retain the next generation of human service professionals? That's a mouthful. We all have to take a collective breath for that one.
Absolutely. But I've been thinking about it since morning. I think the panels today demonstrate what our next step should be. Every panel talked about resources, knowledge, and research all day. And so if we can get Dr. Chambers to give us some money, if we can get Shawn to continue to talk about schools, and I can just go down the list, right? Because I made notes today. I just come together through Alan and everyone to create a hub where we're thinking about how to coordinate finances to get the research done so that we can continue to develop interventions so that we can continue to do the work. That's sustainability. Because if we don't have the monies to do the work and get the research done, you're not going to get the interventions that is the forward or the imagining thinking for 2026 and beyond, right? So we have the schools saying we're here. That was one of the asks. Are the institutions of higher learning around to do that, help with that research? And we're saying yes. We're saying yes. And so how then can we continue to collaborate and make sure that this conversation continues so that next year when we come, we can say we got the mayor's office to give us, how much we need, Alan?
You're not gonna get me in trouble in here. I'm gonna let Ahsia talk about that. Where's that?
It's being recorded.
Right.
By the exit
right now.
But in all fun and joke, right, we need to get more research done so that we can continue this work. Because today's message is loud and clear. New York City is the building, is the avenue, is the blueprint, is the pathways for how we're going to continue to be the most friendly city around how we work with fathers.
And I think some of these innovations that have been discussed today, particularly the ones involving the engagement of fathers in 1992 or 3, there was a panel on fatherhood that Vice President Al Gore held in Tennessee, right? And I put out when she was sitting there talking about using online mechanisms to connect fathers who are incarcerated with their children. I said it because I was being a wise guy at the moment, but to have a policymaker in the area of criminal justice who thinks about this seriously and how we can connect fathers to their kids online, it's a sea change in terms of thinking about how we. It's very difficult for mothers to bring children into a prison it's a hostile environment, right? And so why not take advantage of the technology that we do everything on YouTube, for crying out loud? Why is it that we couldn't connect fathers to their children while they're there? And so we have all sorts of movements along in the system. Again, at Columbia, you have a placement officer who is vitally interested in this work. Use him in order to get students placed, in order to get them familiar with what goes on in the field, and that's another mechanism that you can grow the work.
One of the pieces, we might have said it already, but meeting in even at the undergraduate level for students with advisors and being able to provide a program, the kind of courses that the students would need to take if they're interested in becoming a social worker, and work with these departments. New York City, father friendly, work in New York City with some of the universities, whether Columbia, NYU, Hunter, I'm a Hunter graduate myself, as Hunter, working with those, academic advisors, guiding those students, because unless you can do that, the students end up in a couple of years and still don't know, okay, what am I doing? I'm interested in this or I'm interested in that. But usually, if you get that student to pinpoint what they want to do, you can direct them into some of these programs. There's so many classes that you can that are available, in the behavioral studies and psychology, all these other areas in terms of, you're working, you become a social worker and you're dealing with someone who's been incarcerated and you don't know how to talk or encourage or what to say to that student. Had you had that training from your undergrad going into your graduate program, you would be able to do that. You're just, as I was sitting there, in New York City, there's so many different cultures that are here. And cultures deal with things differently. Man, I'm from Jamaica. And we know, growing up, how culturally things were said and done. Whether you from, when I was doing the course online, we had students from China, different parts of, South America. The behaviors and the views of fathers, there's things that are similar, but there's things that are different. So if you're here in New York City and you're working with individuals that that child's father is from El Salvador or something, but you have you are unable to communicate cross-culturally, you cannot help that, you cannot help in that situation the way you should be able to. So it's so important that as we develop and move forward in this program, that you take it from that early training in college, again, working with advisors and helping that student become strong in the kind of program and the outcome that we expect in this field.
I just want to respond to something that keeps coming up, which is incarcerated fathers. And I think that schools of social welfare and other educational institutions would benefit from more abolitionist and anti-carceral perspectives instead of normalizing, questioning why we are incarcerating the largest number of people of anybody on any country's population. I think sometimes we skim over that, and schools of social welfare would benefit from more abolitionist perspectives relating to incarceration, as well as the family policing system known as child welfare services. So I think that's beyond the scope of this panel, but we kind of skate around it without actually talking about why we're not addressing the incarceration of men and fathers and why they're being incarcerated. I did want to mention that Stony Brook is proposing a collaboration with the Department of Youth and Community Development. We're trying to work on developing like a mini certification or certificate program for MSW students, and we're proposing that it would include them taking the Fathers and Family class, being placed in a father-serving agency, receiving specialized supervision that would be provided between myself and somebody from Youth and Community Development, as well as like maybe specialized seminars where we could bring fathers in or bring program directors in to talk to students. So that would be my dream over the next year, since it's something that I'm trying to work on. And the goal would be just to enhance the pipeline of really passionate social workers who want to do work with fathers and have this specialized training.
Thank you so much for all those comments on that question. And I just want to say it's interesting even to hear your initial comments, Dr. Gray. You know, this whole thing of New York City exceptionalism around New York City and all of our work, there is that, right? And I think our last Fatherhood and Focus conversation back in May or June, we had folks from all over the nation on that call. So I think part of what we want to see in the coming year and months is continue this conversation and really pull out from these discussions the next steps that we heard from all these panels, right? And as we bring folks together in those Fatherhood and Focus conversations to really think about what does it look like elsewhere, what can it look like here in New York City? And you know, even Dr. Haywood, you know, your statement there about just not normalizing the incarceration, mass incarceration, et cetera, and even in child welfare. One thing we're seeing clearly now with ACS here in New York City, right, is the launch of their Fatherhood initiative. And so, again, we will continue to reflect on the great work that's happening there and how that's going forward too. So this is so powerful and really needs to continue to be talked about, as you noted. So thank you. This was a great conversation, and I think we're ready for questions. How many questions can we have? How much time would we have? All right, let's go for it and see. Let's go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm looking at the screen. It says father-friendly curriculum, and obviously academia is necessary. Credentials are valid, required, data, it shows on that. Is there any initiative or any discussion around older adults, curriculum specifically designed for that population who can then serve along with their credentials in a lived experience space? Because when you get younger generations who move through, they're at the bachelor's level and they go out into the field, they have the information, but information is not wisdom. Wisdom comes from lived experience. Now we're in an age of technology, everything is moving so fast. So they are brilliant, but having brilliance and knowing when to use what, for what purpose, I think comes again with lived experience. So again, my question is there any conversation about educating older adults who are interested in this curriculum, who have lived experience, to combine the qualitative and the quantitative, to show up and engage fathers from a lived space?
Okay, I'll take a shot at that. I will say that, and I think that's the purpose of this, of number 7 in the 10-point plan, right? When we had the conversation back in May, this father-focused conversation around this curriculum specifically, I believe it was Dr. Jeff Johnson at the time, he commented and said, let's look at academics, let's look at the opportunities to do this work in schools of social work, but let's also look beyond that. Let's look at the continuing education piece, right? And so that's where I think what you're saying comes into play, right? In the continuing education opportunities where you can educate those folks with some lived experiences. They've been in the field a while, and you're gonna continue to strengthen them to do that work. I hope that responds a bit to your question.
May I respond a little bit, Alan?
Sure, please.
So,
Panelists.
at Silberman, the OIR, the one-year residency students, are much older than what we think about the traditional student looks like, right? So in the BSW program, we do have the younger end, but we do have some students who are returning to school, and so they're more mature. But in the master's program, the one-year residency students are much, much more mature, that they have been working in their institutions for years and are returning to school. So I don't want the message to be that it's only youth that are in the MSW programs, right? Because it's not. But in terms of continuing ed, so let's say, the other thing is we also have the senior conference that is coming up where they're talking about how do we work with seniors, right? And what are some of the things. But in continuing education, if there are anyone in this room who wants to do workshops with the more mature person, we can talk about that because that's what continuing ed is about, right? So we can.
Yeah, and I think even in what I was referencing Dr. Jeff Johnson's comment in that conversation, that's what he said. He said, don't just stick to the schools, go to the CBOs and work with them to this point. Who is our second person?
Good afternoon to everybody. I want to say thank you to all the panelists. This was a great opportunity. As a black man, a father, somebody who also has criminal justice involvement, I'm a single parent. I grew up without both my parents, and so I have a lot of trauma inside of me. I'm wondering how, and just using the Just Practice framework, how much more effective this panel could be with people who have lived experience upon the panel speaking out to the people. I think it's great that we're here to try to come up with different ways to support people, but I think it would be so much more effective if we had the people who are affected to sit up here and speak about how they want to support.
I mean, I think that's, I don't know if anybody on the panel wants to speak to that, or say anything to that, because that's amazing, absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being here. And also, just to respond, you know, I struggle with social work as like the gatekeeping to, like, you have to be a social worker in order to do this work. You don't have to be a social worker to do this work. Your lived experience as a father is just as valid and just as valuable. And I think part of the reason this curriculum that was developed is so meaningful to the students is because it does center the voices of fathers who are affected by all these systems. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. One of the things that I did with the program was I did a lot of invites about guest speakers come to the class, and among them were individuals that were incarcerated and doing different kinds. And so it was amazing, the students, and my students are of different age levels, but people really appreciate what was being said and was encouraged in a way of helping folks who are incarcerated. Yeah.
And just to say too, I think your comment is really spot on, and I think it's something that we keep hearing at the city agency level, whether we're trying to do anything around credible messengers, or we're trying to do anything around outreach, or anything of that nature. We've met with other fatherhood programs, and they keep telling us that same thing, right? You have to figure out a way to center the voices and experiences of folks with lived experiences so that they can actually speak to the policymakers who are sort of 30,000 feet up in the air, apart from the fact that they might have their own lived experiences, which is amazing, but to sort of real-time opportunities to have that kind of communication. So it's something we definitely have to look at.
Hi everyone, my team and I really, we're grateful to be here today. We work with the expectant families in NYCHA. I want to tell you all thank you so much. Your speeches have really helped us and motivated us to go out into the community, do better. My question goes along with the person just spoke. I wanted to talk about mental illness. Just mental health, like we're talking about all these services we want to provide to fathers once they're released. But we know that many of them, when they come out, end up back in prison because they didn't get the services that they needed to adjust to society. So I just wanted to know what we're doing to help them before they actually, come out into society and able to move forward.
I think there's a big space of community-based, formerly incarcerated programs, right? And there is a nexus between what they do and what the field of community-based responsible fatherhood programs do. There's a national association of these of programs that work with formerly incarcerated people and embedded in their work is work around fathers, because so many of men who are incarcerated are fathers, and so getting connected to that group is part of what you need to do, including also the work in NYCHA, right? Because just being in public housing in the first place, and whether you have access to your child who lives in public housing, if you don't. In fact, Flona got into this work because we had some pillow talk around the difficulty of men who have children in public housing, and that set her off into her. She wrote her doctoral dissertation on it.
I just wanted to respond to the mental health. So I also work with a fatherhood program on Long Island, and we do ongoing research. And so what you already know is what I'm going to say, is that we're seeing high levels of depression, anxiety, and we're also seeing a reluctance for engaging in mental health services for reasons that are different for fathers and men than what we're used to educating social work students about how to engage clients. So it just brings it back to centering these stories, and also the competence question that you talked about, the cultural humility, the cultural competence, that it's not the same when you're engaging a man in a conversation about mental health services. So I think that comes back to the social work education, but it also comes back to, just to take it like way away on the policy side, the federal funding for these fatherhood programs. The federal funds that we get, they specifically say you cannot provide mental health services. So why is that? Why are they not allowing us to provide a service that research shows is an ongoing issue?
And also to add, right, Dr. Stephen Chambers mentioned this morning about certain programs that he's working on. So back in the day, we had our own Rolodex, right? So I just aged myself. Right? You had linkages, right? There are a lot of programs in here today So how do you look and say, okay, which program you're in, can I get your number? Do you have a mental health component? What are some of the local initiatives that are happening around NYCHA? NYCHA is a huge institution, right? So what are some of the programming that are happening around some of the NYCHA programs, and that you can pick up that phone and call and say, look, I have someone coming home and they need mental health support. Can I get an appointment? And they're not gonna say you have to wait 90 days. All right? Osborne, we place students at Osborne. How do you get to Miss Archer and say, Miss Archer, I got people coming home, I need some support, right? I have families who have family, dads or moms who live in Dannemora. Can I get on that bus and take the children up there to go see, right? So community-based organizations are working together. So how do you have that Rolodex that you can pick up the phone and say, Pat Gray, I need this number, I need this help, can I get some support, right?
I want to say I'm so pleased that I was included in this and enjoyed every minute of it. I want to echo and piggyback on a lot of what people have said here around two major points, which is the importance of CBOs being involved in program design, and also the scope of where you find expertise to do this. And I hope that this will be okay for me to say. So I am a master's and PhD marriage and family therapist. MFTs are very, very well positioned to help do this work because family systems is our bedrock. Cultural humility, our bedrock. Trauma-informed practice, our bedrock. And there are MFT programs, not to throw any shade whatsoever on social work, just to say that we can expand the lens. I've been mentoring interns from MFT programs and also social work interns along with the SIFI supervisor who we have at our agency, and it's absolutely wonderful for everyone. So that said, I'm a researcher. I did a research PhD. I completely respect evidence-based practice. This is a substance use treatment agency that I work for. There's also practice-based evidence. So we have taken curricula and adapted it to meet the needs of our specific population. And then we've adapted it more to address the needs of fathers in our particular population. So I really think that the inclusion of all the CBOs, I can only imagine the amazing expertise that's in this room right here, where we can be mining what is already working, what's already been tried. So, right, yes. And that actually, thank you, sir, for saying this about lived experience. At our agency, we also use SERPAs, Certified Recovery Peer Advocates. And I work alongside a SERPA who has the SERPA F, the SERPA family designation. He has lived experience as a father, as a family member of someone with mental illness and substance use, as a person with experience incarcerated. So we work together implementing our programs. So it's just, I think when we just look broadly at the expertise that's there, it's great. And look to the MFT programs too. And include MFTs in your job listings so that more of them can be hired. You very rarely see MFT or LMFT listed as an eligible hire designation.
One last question. Good afternoon, everybody. This was wonderful. Thank you, Ahsia, and I'm glad I did show up today. A lot of people hit on some of the things that I wanted to say. I'll just say this in addition. We should take these opportunities when we do get together to coalesce ideas. Like, it's great to ask the people on the panel, but again, there's people that are practitioners doing the work and living it every day that I can speak to exactly what my fathers are going through. Right now, I serve 150 fathers, and probably by the end of the year, it'll be 250 fathers. I can speak to exactly what they're going to or going through, and I just think that when we do come together collectively, and we have all the right minds and all the right people in the room, we should be collecting ideas. I'm going to end on that.
I'm sorry. I have one quick question. My name is Nazir Wilson, and we're Real Dads Network. Can you read the last question that you asked the panel?
If New York City is serious about becoming a father-inclusive city, what is one concrete action universities, accrediting bodies, or city agencies should take in the next year to ensure fatherhood engagement is embedded in how we recruit, train, and retain the next generation of human services professionals?
So just to keep it short and sweet, something that I heard earlier in reference to fatherhood was like, in doing the fatherhood work, we attach this to manhood, you know, walking gentlemen through their experience as men. So just to kind of answer that question a little bit, I wanted to answer that question with the question is, through MSW programs and undergrad programs, how are we keeping men involved? Black men represent 10 to 15% of graduates in MSW programs. Women represent 85 to 90%. So how are we keeping our men involved in their families and these programs? And then secondly, I have a brother that I worked with when I was at Rising Ground. His name is Gavin Riley, and he asked me, how is he, as a father, separate from any of us that do this work, able to gain curriculum like this for himself? So those are two questions that I have for you guys.
So at the Silverman School of Social Work, the 3 classes that I teach, Terry is in one of my classes. And so we talk about Black men and what Black men experiences are on campus, because the argument is that they feel invisible. We have Black professors who are males, or who are identified as males, who are willing to talk to the students to ensure that their voices are being heard. You have social workers who identify as women, who will pause the class to have the conversation about being visible. What is it that you want us to hear? We women will stop talking, and so that you can tell us. I'm serious. Ask Terry. Ask him. Because I want the men in the room to be heard. 81% of the room are women. 81%. So if we're talking about fatherhood and Black Men Initiative and what are some of the issues that are presenting men while they're trying to talk to strong Black women, what do we need to do? And how we need to do it to engage.
So this has been an amazing conversation. I will say, what I didn't say at the beginning, Shawn kind of put me out there, but I'm a dad to 2 children, a 12-year-old boy and a 9-year-old little girl. And I think for me, even in this question, when I'm talking to my 2 Black children about what mental health looks like for them on a day-to-day basis here in New York City, and as they are going to be growing through and going through and moving beyond where we currently live into the world, I have to constantly think about, particularly for my Black son, my daughter as well, but in this context of your question, my son, about how he understands himself, because I hear about the gentleman from YMI, my brain is freezing a minute, but he talked about New York City men heal. And so how do we begin to heal our children, right? Because these men that you're speaking about didn't just get there, right? It didn't just get to be 85, 90% versus 10 or 15% yesterday. This is generational, right? So what does it look like for my son, my daughter, our sons, our daughters, our grandchildren, etc., to be healed to the place where they can see getting that help as a need, a real need that they should avail themselves to anytime it's offered, right? As it is offered in a healthy way. And then also be able to go and be, as they would say, wounded healers, right? Repairers of all the places that need to be built up in their own communities and families, right? So this is a hope-filled day, a hope-filled conversation, and this has been amazing. Thank you so much for your participation. Give it up for our panelists.